Hey everyone, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you with another vid. And in this one, I saw Metal Mickey and Andy Cloudy Miler do this, so I thought I would get involved in this. And I find the very title of this thread quite offensive, sirs. 10 terrible albums that aren't St. Anger. How could anyone ever think that St. Anger is a terrible album? It got a perfect 5-star review on deafmusicreview.com. So clearly it's a masterpiece, and everyone is so mistaken. Okay, that gotten out of the way. If anyone gets offended by anyone's opinions on this, get over yourselves. If you want to unsub, whatever, who cares? So anyway, jumping into this, I want to start off by saying that I'm cheating a little bit, as about 6 out of these 10 I don't feel are truly terrible, more middling / mediocre than terrible, right? Because I just don't have that many terrible albums in my collection, and the reason for that is simply because of the fact that ever since the internet age has been a thing, you can preview albums before you buy them. So I don't really tend to buy anything that I'm not already familiar with and know that I like. I don't. There's not too many surprises nowadays when I buy an album. So, whatever. And I've been meaning to make this video anyway. Basically, what I consider to be the worst albums in my collection. So, with all the babbling out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into this. And the first album that I'm going to show, I feel really epitomizes the whole, it's truly a mediocre album. Not terrible, but it's kind of as mediocre, generic, paint by the numbers for this particular band as one can get. And that is Megadeth's The World Needs a Hero. I don't really feel that this has very many redeeming qualities. Let's look at the track listing here real quick. I do like the song Moto Psycho. And that's really that's the only song on here that I'm looking at that I think is really good. The rest of them are just kind of like, they're there, they exist. But truthfully, if I never heard this album again, I couldn't care less. So we'll start with that. Next album I'm going to show off. There are a few songs on here I like, but it's not, again, it's maybe 2 or 3 songs. And I bought this back when this band was absolutely huge on the radio and all that. Not so much for this album, but the album before this one. But there's some charm to this album, but again, it just doesn't do a lot for me, and that's Live's Secret Samhati, or however you would pronounce this. I'm not entirely sure. There are a few good tracks on this, I will admit, but overall it's kind of meh. Now, going to the Sunset Strip, I feel Motley Crue's Girls, Girls, Girls kind of, falls into that same boat, because really, the only 2 songs on this that I really like is the title track and Wild Side. The other 8, they're okay. They're truly just okay. I mean, again, everything I've shown so far, I don't find it offensively bad. It's not like Saint Anger, where it's like literal torture to listen to it. It's just more like, this is boring, completely forgettable, who cares, move on type of thing. So, alright, next one is going to be Def Leppard's Adrenalize. Again, the album's okay. I do really like, Let's Get Rocked and Heaven Is. Those are 2 pretty good tracks, but again, kind of similar. The rest of them kind of very meh. Again, just my opinion. Alright, the next one is going to be a twofer. one of absolutely my favorite bands, but well, hell, I don't even know if this band's going to exist anymore very shortly, considering what happened with the main songwriter of it. So yeah, I guess these are yeah, rounding out the top 6, as it were. And it's Iced Earth's Dystopia and Plagues of Babylon. Again, I don't hate these, right? And I think I just bought these more out of habit because I was such a giant Iced Earth fan for so long. But truthfully, to me, the era of that band that's really worth exploring is the Matt Barlow era. Prior to that, whatever, simply because Iced Earth re-recorded the bulk of those 2 albums into Days of Purgatory, and Matt Barlow sings on those. And truthfully, I vastly prefer the versions on Days of Purgatory to like the original 2 albums. Now, the original 2 albums do have their charm, but Barlow is by far the better performer than the other 2 singers were. And I do like Stu Block. You know, their current, well, actually, no, he left the band. The only one that's left is John Schaefer. But anyway, I digress. The most recent singer, I do like him. I do think Stu Block has a great voice and all that. I just feel that when he was in the band, I just feel that the song, not any fault of Stu's, by the way. I think he's fantastic. I just think the songwriting was definitely less inspired. Although there is one really great Ripper was in there for a couple, and I think The Glorious Burden was decent. And I really love Framing Armageddon Part 1. That was awesome. But the Barlow era is by far the best part of that band, and truthfully, at this point, I feel the band overall is kind of irrelevant, and they were irrelevant long before John took place in the January 6th riot, as he so famously did. But anyway, moving on. Now I'm going to talk about the albums that I consider actually kind of bad. And I'm going to try to do this in descending order from least bad to worst. And it's only 4 albums. And what will be the absolute worst album on my collection? We'll get to that. Don't worry. First one is this Samuel Exodus. I bought this, God, back in the 90s when it came out. I still have it because, again, unlike some of the other VC members, I'm just too lazy to get rid of shit sometimes. It's not worth anything, so I just hang on to it out of pure, I have no idea why. Although maybe this will be worth something one day. Probably not, but hey, whatever. It's not, and as far as bad goes, this is not horrendous. Like, it's not horrendously bad. I just find it very plodding, boring, yada, yada, yada. Not much to this at all. It's not offensively bad, but I do consider it kind of bad. It's just boring and plodding. The end. All right, so there's that one. Next album that I consider bad is absolutely one of my favorite acts. That they also are going through some turmoil. Not quite as bad as Iced Earth, but definitely going through some turmoil of their own. And this album, I feel, compared to, it's their first album, and I feel compared to every album that came since, this is far down the list. Because on this album, they were just trying to be just a straight, like, kind of generic death metal band, and I don't think they did it all that well, and that is Fear Factory's Soul of a New Machine. I know this album has its fans, but when I compare this to everything else Fear Factory did, this gets the major, major, major thumbs down from me. It's just not good, right? Sorry, it's crap compared to their other albums. I know some strongly disagree with that, but hey, it's how I feel, and there you go. Because they became so much more from Demanufacture on than what they were on this. So there you go. Second worst album in my collection. This is an album I've actually talked about a lot in a lot of my videos. because it's one of the first 2 albums I ever actually owned ever, right? And I enjoy listening to this album quite a bit. It gives me tons of nostalgia, and this album, of these 10 that I'm showing, this is one that I will probably never get rid of, despite the fact that I feel it's the second worst album in my collection, purely because of nostalgia on my part. But I realize that this album is nothing but like just pure schlock, and that is Poison's "Open Up and Say Ah." You know, I will say one thing for the songs: they're quite catchy, they get in your head, but they're schlock. They're just meh. You know what I mean? Um, so there you go. All right. Before I show the worst album off in my collection, I'm gonna mention some almost made it ins. The Use Your Illusion albums of Guns N' Roses could have made it in here because I find those to be kind of mediocre overall. But the reason they didn't is because when you take the good songs from the 2 Use Your Illusion albums and put them together, you get like one really killer album. So like about half of that double album I feel is actually quite good. And I just felt the number of good songs was too high. Same thing with like Iron Maiden's No Prayer for the Dying, because when I looked at it, there were like 4 or 5 tracks on it that I thought are actually killer. So I was like, no, that can't make it. So basically, if there were several songs on an album that I really liked, they just couldn't make it on there. And there were a few others like that. But anyway, I'm now going to show you guys the absolute worst album in my collection. And this thing is just dog shit. And has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And that is Wasp's Eldorado. Absolutely terrible. This is as bad as like a Saint Anger. It's extremely painful to listen to. The songs are poorly constructed. The performances are abysmal. You know, it's kind of comically bad. It's so bad, it's actually entertaining, somewhat entertaining to listen to, even though it's quite awful. So that's my 10 that I decided to throw in. So of course, go into the comments below. Let me know if you agreed or disagreed with it. Let me know if you think these are the 10 greatest albums ever and why you have such misguided notions. So anyway, that is pretty much it. As always, live long and prosper. Keep on rocking. I'll see you guys in the next one.